Good afternoon, everybody. Or I guess good evening at this point. This is Gerudo King. I am reading The Unsearchable Riches. This is Volume 1, Issue 18, They That Dwell on the Earth. Very excited to get into this one. This is by Vladimir Gelesnoff. This apocalyptic phrase has given rise to diverse interpretations. Most of these, however, invest it with a significance other than that conveyed by the combination of words. The commonly accepted application of the phrase to those rejecting the gospel in this dispensation is at variance with the context and fraught with difficulties. Why, for instance, should the everlasting gospel be preached to them? Satan's minion comes with power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceit of unrighteousness for them that are perishing, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God sends them a working of error, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be judged who believe not in the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. This is 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12. I'm going to read it one more time in the updated concordance. It's far easier to apprehend it when it's in the updated concordance. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. It is verses 9 through 12. So we're going to, making sure here. Okay. We can start at verse 7 because that's the beginning of the sentence. For the secret of lawlessness is already operating. This is in reference to, well, at the time of Paul's writing, it was very early in his career, but it's still true. The secret of lawlessness is already operating. And I believe that in the divine mysteries part of the unsearchable riches, they'll get into the secret of lawlessness here. Only when the present detainer, which is us, may be coming to be out of the midst, then it will be unveiled the lawless one, the Antichrist, whom the Lord Jesus will dispatch with the spirit of his mouth and will discard by the advent of his presence, whose presence is in accord with the operation of Satan, with all power and signs and false miracles, and with every seduction of injustice among those who are perishing, because they do not receive the love of the truth for their salvation. And therefore, God will be sending them an operation of deception for them to believe the falsehood. This is God deciding to do this, to send deception. God is allowed and supposed to send deception at this point in the story, for them to believe the falsehood, that all may be judged who do not believe the truth, but delight in injustice. Lie, not truth, woes, not glad tidings, will be sent to those who now turn a deaf ear to the appeals of grace. We prefer to take the phrase au pied de la lettre, I don't know that, and elucidate it by reference to the context and scope of the book. But what have we to study our thoughts amidst the jarring, discordant interpretations floating about us? There are two supports. One, the meaning of the phrase, and two, its employment. First of all, the Greek word ge combines the cognate ideas which we express by earth and land. Oh, I think that makes, okay. Therefore, its import must be determined by the scope of the passage in the immediate or remote context. It is clear that where our versions render it land or country, it could bear no other meaning, since it is restricted to specified localities, such as land of Judah in Matthew 3:6, land of Israel in Matthew 2:20 and 21, land of Zebulun, Matthew 4:15, and land of Sodom and Gomorrah in Matthew 10:15 and 11:24. That the land without such qualifiers as Judah or Israel sometimes refers to Palestine is witnessed by the context of each occurrence. Matthew 9:26 and 31, and 23:23, 24:30, 27:45, Mark 15:33, Luke 4:25, Luke 21:33, and more. Luke 23:44 also belongs to this category. The tenor of the narrative and the parallel passages insist on the reading land. Matthew 27:45 and Matthew 15 or Mark 15:33. If you've never read these, I recommend going back. I'm not going to do it now for the sake of time, but I do plan on going back through these citations later. So, yeah, the land. If you want a word study on it, it's just as valuable as doing a word study on expectation or will or intention or any other. Matthew 24:30 and Revelation 1:7 likewise demand the reading land, both referring to Zechariah's portrayal of the sorrow and mourning of Israel's tribes gathered in their land at the time of Messiah's return, Zechariah 12:10-14. In Luke 21, the same word is rightly rendered land in verse 23 and earth in verse 25, because the former views the coming tribulation in relation to the favored land and people, whereas the latter views it in relation to the nations and the earth at large. Let's read that again. In Luke 21, the same word is rightly rendered land in verse 23 and earth in verse 25, because the former views the coming tribulation in relation to the favored land and people, whereas the latter, in verse 25, earth views it in relation to the nations, and as such the earth at large. Thus the phrase is more accurately rendered, they that dwell in the land. Secondly, they that dwell in the earth are distinguished from every nation and tribe and tongue and people, in 14:6. Herein lies the solution of the problem. Only one nation is thus singled out from every other nation. Only one land is thus differentiated from every other land. That nation is Israel. That land is Palestine. So at the time of this writing, just to keep in mind, in 1909 or 1910, I think by this point in the PDF, Israel was not yet a nation. It hadn't been placed on the map again the way that it is now. It was Palestine. So that's what he's saying. He's distinguishing the land from the nation. This fixes for us the translation land and proves that the phrase is a sobriquet of the renegade Jews, which will then reside in the land of their fathers. And the various texts where dwellers in the land appear give us a connected view of the part which apostate Israel will play in the great transactions of the day of the Lord. This fact well accords with the Jewish character of the apocalypse, which is too obvious to need comment. The symbolism and imagery are Jewish throughout, as also the titles of Christ. The very first reference to the Advent points to Zechariah and views it in relation to Israel's tribes in 1:7, Zechariah 12:10, and Isaiah 52:8. The seven churches are Jewish in number, in name, in types, in symbols, in figures of speech, in Old Testament quotations, in warnings and promises, in responsibility, in the titles of the Lord, in their angels, in their relation to earthly government in chapters 2 and 3. A vision in heaven discloses the pattern of which the tabernacle and temple were copies in 4 and 5. The symbolism of the seals and mingles the mystic forces of Zechariah with Jeremiah's fourfold types of doom, chapter 6. With the opening of the seventh seal, there breaks upon us the wisdom of the numbered thousands from the tribes of Israel, chapter 7, verses 1-8. The stormy scenes in the 11th chapter are laid in Jerusalem, which becomes, as of old, the battleground of the powers contending for suzerainty, authority. The magnificent symbolism of chapter 12 embodies forth the invisible contest between Israel and the spiritual powers of wickedness, while the monstrous forms of the next chapter enhance the visible phase of the same fierce contest, the final clash of Israel with the nations. Then, before judgment reaches the final stage, there appear the followers of the Lamb, emerging victorious from the conflict and arrayed for war, with the names of the Lamb and of the Father on their foreheads, chapter 14 and 15. The mystery of Babylon unveils the climax of Israel's apostasy, the horrid marriage of the recreant nation with the son of perdition in chapters 17 and 18. Chapter 20 contemplates the favored nation reinstated at the head of the nations, while chapter 21 and 22 present their transcending glory in the new earth and the surpassing splendor of their new metropolis. We may now take up each passage separately. To the synagogue of Philadelphia, as a reward for keeping the word of his patience, is promised exemption from that hour of temptation, which is to come upon the whole inhabited earth, oikumene, to tempt them that dwell in the land. Revelation 3:10. In chapter 13, we have both the temptation, verses 1-8, and the patience, verses 9 and 10. The sons of Israel holding the faith of Jesus are persecuted by their unbelieving brethren, which are branded as a synagogue of Satan. Chapter 2, verse 9 and 3, verse 9. When the dark and dismal hour arrives, the perverts are caught in the snare, and those who have patiently endured are kept therefrom. Some by an ascension in triumph, like Elijah's, chapter 12, verse 5, others by a concealment in the wilderness, similar to Elijah's when Ahab sent ambassadors to every nation and kingdom to search for him. Chapter 12, verse 14, 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 7 through 10. I see. So Elijah's. I see. So there's a comparison there. And they, those slain under the altar, cried with a great voice, saying, How long, O Master, the holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell in the land? Chapter 6, verse 10. The previous chapter noted the slander circulated by unbelieving Jews to incite the Gentile mob against their faithful brethren. Chapter 2, verse 9. And the Lord's exhortation to fealty unto death in view of impending persecution. Chapter 2, verse 10. Now, under the fifth seal, the threatened persecution has broken out and claims numerous victims. It follows on the wake of the fourth horseman, who received authority over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword and with famine and with pestilence and by the wild beasts of the earth. Chapter 6, verse 8. This rider, whose name is Death, is the destroyer of chapter 9, verse 11, and the conqueror of chapter 13. His methods of extermination establish the identity. He kills with the sword. This is the penalty for refusal to bow to the beast's image. Chapter 13, verse 15. He kills with famines, the sequence of the prohibition to buy and sell. Chapter 13, verse 17. He kills with pestilence. This will be accomplished by the fire which he causes to come down from heaven. Chapter 13, verse 13. And he kills with wild beasts. This will be a revival of the ghastly scenes which drew crowds of excited Romans to the Colosseum. In these tyrannical ways, the beast will deplete the ranks of Jewish saints. And the connection between the fourth and fifth seals is apparent. One shows the persecutor, the other the persecuted. The one enumerates the forms of torture, and the other pictures its victims, calling on the Lord to avenge their blood on them that dwell in the land. There's a fine touch of naturalness in this appeal. The martyrs implore vengeance, not on the executioneers acting there under orders, but on the real instigators of these bloody scenes, their renegade brethren. In the next two occurrences, chapter 11, verse 10, those that dwell in the land are the chief objects of the testimony of the two witnesses and the chief jubilants over their death. While the assemblage of the nations, who then hold the city, looks on and denies them burial, chapter 11, verse 9, they that dwell in the land celebrate the murder of their opponents by exchanging gifts. It is notable that here, as in chapter 14, verse 6, the dwellers in the land are differentiated from those of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations. Chapter 13, where the phrase is that found thrice, brings before us the beast, the man of the hour, the popular idol of the time. We see him in relation to humankind in verses 1 through 5, and in relation to the people and the land of Israel in verses 6 through 10. First, we behold the unanimous reception and divine homage accorded him by the whole earth, verses 3 and 4. And in verse 8, we learn that he will be as cordially received and worshipped by them that dwell in the land. Here, the dwellers in the land are distinguished both from the Israelites whose names are written in the book of life and from those of other peoples and tongues and nations. In the description of the second beast, too, our attention is first drawn to the universal extent of the influence he wields on behalf of the first beast in verse 12, and then is pointed to the special effect of his lying miracles on them that dwell in the land in verse 14. And I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having eternal good tidings, Ionian tidings, to proclaim unto them that dwell in the land, and unto every nation and tribe and tongue and people. Chapter 14, verse 6. This gospel concerns creation, which shares with man in redemption. By man, creation was subjected to vanity. By man also, there's a big lie. Whoa, right there, sitting in the, see, people say this thing like, hey, don't you just blindly agree with that guy, knock on everything he says? No, I don't. This isn't in line with what the text says. The Romans 8:20 doesn't say that by man creation was subjected to vanity. It says that creation was subjected involuntarily, not voluntarily, to vanity because of him who subjects it, because of God, not because of man. Maybe he changes this word by to through, dia, in Greek. So maybe it's through man. No, and even then it doesn't make sense because it's technically in a relative sense through Satan. I mean, really, if you want to get even more specific, I mean, yeah, Adam was really subjected to vanity at Genesis 2 when he was enamored with the woman that God made for him. So yeah, I mean, in like a really, really, really hardcore stretch of the sense, but I don't think that that's what he meant. I think he was just saying that it's man's fault. I'm pretty sure these guys might have even thought of free will at this point. You know, it's entirely possible. But nonetheless, this is not true. And thankfully, Knock corrects himself later on. The commission in the last chapter of Mark is the creation commission, based on the resurrection of Christ, the Son of Man, and accompanied by powers requisite to restore it to its primordial bliss. Once this fact is apprehended, we possess a key which gives point and color to some seemingly strange details. Isaiah pictures with fondness and blessedness of material and animal creation under the personal rule of the Messiah. Isaiah 11, 6-9, and 65, 25. Mark's words, and he was with the wild beast, in Mark 1:13, are in keeping with these prophecies. He begins with a foretaste of that coming transformation and ends with the signs directed to Earth's restoration. Mark 16, verses 15-19. All apostles carried on that commission in connection with their special ministry. This is clear from Paul's experiences at Malta, Acts 28, 1-6, and the explicit statement that the gospel was preached to the whole creation under heaven, Colossians 1:23. Unlike the others, this commission was finished. There is no place where it did not reach. Every creature heard the glad tidings of emancipation from vanity through the resurrection of Christ. Though its proclamation was finished, its fruition awaits the manifestation of the sons of God, Romans 8:21. Yeah. When therefore the apocalyptic visions are in course of fulfillment and the manifestation of the sons of God is impending, the Holy Land, which will be the center of blessedness and enjoy it in a higher degree than the rest of the creation, will be accorded a special place in the good news. The last reference dwells once more on the magic potency of Satan's lie on them that dwell in the land in chapter 17, verse 8 of Revelation. An earlier text implied the refusal of the followers of the Lamb to receive the beast in chapter 13, verse 8. This reiterates his apotheosis by seceders from covenant. Our inquiry has led us to identify those that dwell in the land with apostate Israel. This interpretation leaves the words intact, harmonizes with the context and the general theme of the apocalypse, and clarifies various texts and establishes links with other prophecies. Space forbids enlargement. But before drawing this essay to a close, it seems fitting to point out how the variant reading land removes some otherwise insuperable difficulties. The doom of Babylon closes with the words, "And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints, and of all that have been slain in the land," in chapter 18, verse 24. As translated in our versions, this passage is inexplicable, for whether the horror represents the revived city of Nebuchadnezzar, imperial or papal Rome, or apostate Christendom, in neither of these is found the blood of all that have been slain in the earth. The translation land lifts the passage from obscurity. The mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, as already stated, pictures Israel's apostasy at its zenith. The shedding of innocent blood was one of the reasons for the Babylonian captivity, 2 Kings 24, verses 3 and 4. The dreadful massacres of God's witnesses by the dwellers in the land have already been commented upon. And now, in the day of retribution, God requires the blood of his servants at the hand of the war, in Revelation 19, verse 2. This explanation is supported and amplified by the searching words of Christ in Matthew 23:35. The teaching of these apocalyptic passages dovetails remarkably with Zephaniah's representation of that day. The great day of Jehovah is near. It is near and hasteth greatly, even the voice of the day of Jehovah. The mighty man cries there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of gloominess and darkness, a day of trumpet and alarm against the fortified cities and against the high battlements. And I will bring distress upon men, and they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against Jehovah, and their blood shall be poured out as dust, and their flesh as dung. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of Jehovah's wrath. But the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, for he will make an end, yea, a terrible end, of all them that dwelleth in the land. Zephaniah 1:14-18. Well, I did not know that that was a point that was up for debate, but I guess I should have known it, considering how people respond to such truth. So that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know this was in dispute. Interesting. Okay. Well, in the next one, we already read the New Testament thoughts. I might actually have to go back and reread that one because there was a big moment in the middle there where my Wi-Fi checked out. So I'll probably go back and read this again. The next one that we're going to read, I believe, is right here. Going to be on page 261 of the PDF. And hang on. Yes, called God's Word Redeemed. We'll read that when we get there. But until then, thank you all for coming in. For anyone who read this with me, that was a very nice little article. I'll be reading another one shortly. Grace and peace to you all.